Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to today's Level Up webcast session on GitLab's ROI models. This topic is perhaps the most requested session that I can remember in recent history. It's an extension of last week's session on demystifying the metrics conversation. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today, and I want to thank them in advance for all the great work that they've put into what they're going to share today. So our guest speakers are Mahesh Kumar, who leads our competitive intelligence team at GitLab, and also Colin Fletcher, who leads market research and customer insights, both part of the strategic marketing team. So today's session is being recorded. I'll post the notes doc to chat. I'm filling in for John Blevins, who's on PTO this week. In that document, please make sure, please add notes, please add questions. So without further ado, I believe Mahesh is going to kick us off today. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. I just wanted to note that we might make this a public session. So if you're asking questions on audio or video, please refrain from using customer names. And if anything slips out, we might just have to lock down the video at that point. So with that, let me start by highlighting that this is a product of work by a lot of people. And I just want to share some basic information on the GitLab ROI models, but more importantly, highlight that this is sort of a big first step, and we're going to continue to improve it. And we need your input and active participation in making this very successful. And quickly run through the rationale. I think we have a lot of good models, especially some that have been built in the field and used in the field and battle tested. And the problem was that a lot of the best practices were not widely shared across all the models. So we had this thing where a lot of good information was lying in pockets. And so this effort was really to try and bring that together. And the other aspect was that we're seeing increasingly purchase decisions, especially in today's economic climate, is driven by real and measurable benefits, right? ROI that you can prove. So we ended up doing this initiative with a lot of different team members here. You see them. I really thank them from the bottom of my heart for all the inputs that they've given. And without this team effort, none of this obviously would have been possible. What we learned really in this entire exercise was that one size does not fit all, right? We started with a one model type of a picture, but then very soon it became obvious for a variety of reasons, and we'll get to them in a bit here, that enterprise, mid-market, SMB all have slightly different drivers, and slightly different levels of effort they want to put into building an ROI model. So clearly we cannot have one single ROI model that applies in every situation. So that was a first clear outcome of just talking to a lot of sales team members and building consensus through that process. We used industry standard taxonomy. We figured that it was easier to use and explain because customers tend to understand that more easily. So anything we do, if we put that in that general framework, it seemed to work better. And a lot of times data is not available, right? So we have to end up using some good proxies. And the model, typically we've built it assuming that you get all the benefits on day one. So clearly that's not true. Customers, migrate applications over time. So we had to account for adoption, customer adoption over time as opposed to a single one. So with that, I want to highlight the three models that we have. This comes back to the one size does not fit all. Let's walk through this in sequence. The first one is the Forrester TEI model. This is a total economic impact model built by Forrester, and Colin is going to get into that in the following slide. What we found that this model is really well suited for 100% self-serve, right? The customer has all the information. There isn't too much of thinking required to kind of figure out how do I go about this process. And it's typically used in the earlier stages in the life cycle, either to build a budget justification or by, in some cases, I would say from small businesses who just want to get a quick check on what they might benefit from. And that's what this Forrester TEI model is typically used. Then there are two other models. One we are calling the GitLab Simple model, which is again used for business justification. People use this to actually make a justification that we have to buy GitLab because of these benefits we are reaching, we are actually seeing. The advantages is it's from customer data. It requires fewer inputs, but we need some of customers' time to make this happen. Potentially, this could be over time very easily a self-serve model. It may not be there right this instant, but that's what we are looking at. The third one is the more detailed model, and this has been driven mostly by some of our enterprise customers, where they feel like they need to measure. It's almost like a time and motion study for this kind of, or this set of activities. How long did it take before and how long did it take after? How much time are we saving, and so on and so forth. So this requires obviously some benchmarking beforehand, and very detailed. It's situational. Not every line item in this model will apply in all the situations. So we are giving you some options to filter things out that very easily we know don't apply in certain situations. And I'll go through that, some examples of that. So these are sort of the three different models. To be clear, the Forrester TEI model is available online. The other two models are actually available in Google Sheets at this point in time, but we are going to make it available, make a web-friendly version available, which will be open to the public. So it's not like it's a secret that we're going to guard. Ultimately, the goal is to get customers to come in and enter the data self-serve, because we feel the ROI case can be made pretty strong if we present all the different elements in a very easy to consume and easy to understand manner, and they can execute on it. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Colin to talk about the Forrester TEI, and I'll probably just go ahead at the slides there, Colin, and you can talk to it.
Yeah, thank you, Mahesh. I want to be conscious of time, make sure we have enough time for questions for a lot of this stuff. So just a quick note on kind of what the TEI is, how we got there, and then I'll touch on the resources available that are all within the slide deck and in the notes. All the links are here for the different things available. So the Forrester TEI study is a study that we commissioned with Forrester Consulting, who went out and interviewed 4 of our enterprise customers, specifically around their use of GitLab for version control and collaboration, CI and CD. And out of that study, what they found was that there was measurable benefits around 4 key areas: development and delivery efficiency, increased number of releases, improved code quality, and savings from reducing the number of tools in use. The output of that, all of that work of working with our customers, and I'll also use the opportunity to thank everybody who helped facilitate those customer relationships, to have those interviews, to support those interviews along the way, is showing up in multiple forms. So the first thing that you have access to that you can download and share is the study itself. It is several pages, as you might imagine, a little dense in terms of the language at times, but you see the actual model in use, the assumptions made, where the benchmarks came from, and those appropriate citations there. And it is a Forrester branded asset, which is cool. We also have, and what Mahesh was, one of the things that Mahesh was referring to, have secured an online estimator. That's Forrester's language. You might think of it as a calculator, but it's a thing online where basically anybody can go in and input a few meaning approximately 6 different variables into the calculator, and get a rough estimate of what their potential ROI is from investing in GitLab in those value areas. They also have the option to register, give their information, which we have tied into our marketing systems, lead generation systems, Marketo and the like, to download a copy of the report that that incorporates the values that they put into the calculator, right? So it will generate something that looks like the study, the PDF. It is a PDF, but it reflects the person's specific values. If you're in Salesforce and you want to know if your customer has done that, has actually filled that information in, there is a field called Interesting Moments that you'll see a link to that PDF with that information as well. And we are capturing that information and feeding that back into our ongoing demand generation efforts. I'll try to speed up a bit. Recently, we also put together a set of slides with metrics around from industry rankings, data and metrics from customer case studies that we have published, as well as the metrics and pull quotes from the TEI study into a set of slides that you are able to use and repurpose in your own presentations. I've included links here to the sales enablement session that Forrester delivered a while back. You can watch that at your leisure and pleasure. And then if you want to share with various folks some of the recent press attention, is just like to point people to something. We had a DevOps.com article. A reporter interviewed me about the TEI. We published a blog, and you always have the handbook page and can reach out to us for help. Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you, Colin. Really appreciate that. And, this approach has been useful even in later stages to build the ROI, because a lot of customers, when they don't have data and they feel like, I need to have something to justify, right? And they feel like they have gotten the benefits, but I don't exactly have the data. We've had instances where customers have used this model and this estimator to say, if this is an average estimate, even if I get a small percentage or a certain percentage of that benefit, I can still make an ROI case. So we've had examples of customers actually using that even in later stages. So this whole concept of use it in this stage is not hard and fast. I think our job really is to just give you the tools, and you can, given that your customer best, decide which is the best one to use at what point in time. So with that, I'm going to take just a minute or two to walk through this. There is a video that's linked in the agenda document that probably you can pause and understand it a little bit more. Given a fairly short period of time, it's not possible for us to do a full walkthrough of this, but certainly we can add more videos and other walkthroughs and other sessions going forward. So essentially, when you're using this model, it's linked over here. There are 3 key steps you need to do. First one is enter the information on cost data. All these yellow cells are the ones that you would edit based on your customer situation. All the green cells are computed based on the information you enter. So don't modify the green cells because they are computed and driven off of the other yellow cells that you would then end up inputting. And then after that, it's a choice of, do I want the simpler model or do I want the more detailed model? So each of these 2 things are in different sheets, and then the results essentially gets published in the 3rd tab that's called the ROI results tab that's out there. So let me start with a quick show and tell here. So this is your simple development cost. If you had 1,000 developers, you enter 1,000 developers, and then the numbers update. So we've kind of tied these formulas up, and the numbers also update if they are linked to your model over here. So on the simple model, again, you make certain assumptions. The 3 big vectors are: how much time do you save after adopting GitLab? The tools that you replace, that's another big one. And then there's this other number called the developer efficiency gains. This is probably a little bit more nebulous, but people can make a case for maybe a 1 or 2 or a 3% improvement in developer efficiency. Oftentimes, it kind of captures all the small things that you really can't quantify in a quick time, like what's the benefit of, for example, being able to send a message out without them having to open an email. I mean, you can't stop watching those kinds of things, right? Because you can collaborate on the platform. So based on those kinds of things, you can actually use an aggregate metric in terms of how much improvement you get, and that results in some ROI, and you end up sort of totaling all of it. So this is what we call as a simple approach. It still has a few inputs. Over time, we're going to refine these cost numbers. These are not exact numbers, to be very clear. We have a study that we are going to commission to actually try to understand better some of the pricing of some of our competitive products or adjacent products in this space. And so that's how we're going to do that. And if you go to this model over here, simple model ROI, you enter the licensing cost depending on what you're selling them, and you get the ROI, and it also shows you a good sort of a break-even point depending on how quickly the customer might adopt our product, right? Because you can't assume they adopt everything on day one. It's over time, they may migrate all the applications into this platform. So, this kind of accounts for that. But there is a fairly standardized way of, showing this adoption. It's not too flexible, but at least it kind of gives them a better sense for what to expect. Now, on the other hand, the detail model, if you're using that, you still have to fill in the baseline data as you see here. And then you move over to this tab. And here again, it's highlighted or sort of aligned to the DORA model. So it has all your lead time for changes, deployment frequency, and such. And there are some cost numbers that you have to enter. The times and frequency, how often those incidents happen. This is the one that calls for more intense dialogue and knowledge of the customer. There are several customers who have asked us for this level of detail. They said, like, I literally want to sit and measure with a stopwatch. There are customers who do that. There are customers who don't care for it. So it's up to us and the customer as to how we go about this. To be clear, even the license changes and license savings and all that, they are consistent, whether in the simple model or in the more detailed model, because that's a consistent quantity in either situation. If you're making certain licenses that they have currently redundant, clearly we want to capture that. One other feature that's available in both these models is you can actually select which version of the product that you're selling, and based on that, certain rows that either apply or don't apply kind of change. So please don't modify these gray areas. These are just help us to actually drive different rows. For example, if you see here in terms of tools replaced, if I choose premium, I have a whole set of tools that are getting replaced. On the other hand, if I go ahead and change this model and I say, I'm not selling them premium, I'm only selling them the starter version of the product, certain rows disappear. And if I go down, the number of tools that you replace also disappear because certain capabilities are only available in premium. So if you're selling them premium, you clearly can't displace the starter, you clearly can't displace those software that's only available in premium. So this is how we've modeled it. Certainly what we want to do going forward is continue to improve on this, but use this as a single source of truth. Any improvements, suggestions you have, we want to put it here so that everybody can benefit from those improvements. So with that, I'm going to stop here, let you ask some questions, and certainly we kind of go from there.
Hey, Mahesh, it's Mark Bell. I do have a question for you. Can the model be applied to customers that are already on premium but considering an upgrade to Ultimate?
Yes, that's covered in this portion on the right-hand side called sales scenarios. We have not exactly done all of those. Let me share the screen again, sorry. So in these sales scenarios, we will, for example, right now it highlights Jenkins. So we will add a premium to ultimate, scenario. So if you select that premium to ultimate scenario, then clearly a lot of the rows or benefits they've already accrued from having, from those rows that are essentially give you the ROI for using premium would disappear. And only those rows that apply to that delta would show up. And so you then have to deal just with those things. So the model does accommodate that. We haven't polished every one of these scenarios up, but certainly that scenario should be covered here as soon as we make a few updates to it.
All right, I see there's got some notes, questions coming in on the notes doc. Mr. Wells, do you want to verbalize your question, please?
Sure, and I apologize, I may have missed it. I just wanted to know if we had used this with a customer so far. I know this is new and we're getting training. Have we used it with a customer so far? And if so, what about this? Did we get any pushback on the metrics or how we came up with some of the metrics? I'm just looking to understand what objections we may get to this model.
Mm-hmm. So to be clear, this model was developed based on a lot of the customer experiences that we've already had, right? So this is, for example, the simple model, Rashad, built that model essentially, and he's been trying it and using it with a lot of different customers. And we recently used it with another customer. So that's been battle tested. The detailed model, again, is an amalgamation of a lot of handcrafted models that we've done with several customers, right? So these line items are driven by those conversations that we've had. Clearly, this is not the comprehensive set. As we have more conversations, we will add more. As to the numbers, it entirely depends on the customer. So that's why we say these models, the numbers have to be customer driven, right? We can't come up with fake numbers, and it just totally, we lose credibility. But if we put the right numbers, conservative numbers that they really are very comfortable with, we still come out ahead in many scenarios. Clearly, there are some unique scenarios where it's more of a challenge, where if they had a very large, starter installation and they're upgrading to the premium, perhaps, right? That's a little bit more of a challenge sometimes. So there are a few scenarios where, if the customer is very happy with what they have currently, it becomes much harder to make that case. And we will jointly learn those things and figure out how to overcome those. We clearly don't have answers in all of those scenarios, but the purpose of bringing it together is so that we can continue to learn together against one model and improve it.
Love it. Yeah, and if a customer is going to sit down and take the time to help plug in some of these numbers, it's obviously a good sign. And so that was great. Thanks very much, Mahesh.
Thanks for the question, David. Christopher Wang, you're next.
Yeah, so in terms of positioning a meeting, I think it's really good to just ask for time before you position something. So I'm wondering how long it takes to walk a customer through both the simplified and complicated GitLab models. And also just like, let's just say that like you have lots of different customers. When would you suggest using one model versus the other?
Very good question. So first, typically it takes about an hour meeting to collect the input. In some instances, what I've noticed is you get the inputs in the first meeting, you plug it in. We're not really sure if that's the right numbers. Sometimes the customers themselves are not sure. And then we go and sharpen our pencils in a second half an hour meeting, right? So it takes about an hour, I would say, for sure, to collect this information from the customer. The biggest challenge in this, I've noticed that you can't go in saying, let's walk through this line by line, because the customers would like it's too much information for them to digest. So the tactics that have worked well for us is just let the customer talk freely, right? For half an hour. They articulate to you which areas they are seeing the maximum ROI or the benefit, where they are seeing evidence of good benefits. And then we have to sort of dial down in those particular areas and ask the deeper question and get down into specific numbers. So the first meeting is not about walking through the spreadsheet. It's more about collecting the information and the data that we can. Then we can plug those numbers into the model. And the second meeting is to make sure that we've done it right in the model and validate that we've captured their inputs correctly and we are looking at it the right way. So it's sort of almost always, it's at least in the detailed model, it's been a two-step process. I think Rashad has done the simpler model many times before, and I don't think it is as involved in terms of two meetings in the simpler model, but certainly he can articulate. I hope he's on the call here, but if not, we'll let him get you the answer. So hopefully that kind of answers the question that you had.
When would you advocate for the complicated versus the simplified model?
It's a judgment call, honestly. I think the smaller, medium businesses, the simpler model is about as much as they would go. The complicated model is too much. Sometimes the organizations demand that. Like I've had customers who, who like just literally say, I need to know, like, how much time it takes me to kind of commit and do this and that. So it's driven by how much time and effort the customer is willing to spend with us, and also the culture and the scenario or situation within the organization in terms of how much level of granularity the budget owners and procurement and others need. We made a very good ROI case. David else can, is testament for, testimony to that. Very easy to understand. They understood it, but then they went in and the feedback to them was, to really make it shine, I want like line by line specifics, right? And that's that kind of like, for example, they said, I want the time to, manage the permissions and things like that, because for me, that's a big thing, those kinds of things, right? So it comes up all the time. There's no clear answer. It's situational, but the big picture guidelines are simpler model for SMB, small and medium businesses, the detailed one for large enterprises.
Thank you.
Hey, Mahesh, Adam, good stuff. The detailed model, you mentioned a lot of it's based on the DORA metrics. Are we able to mention that? Do you recommend that we say, hey, look, we've based this off a lot of industry leading? I didn't know there's any, I don't want to bring up any kind of legal thing, but I as a seller would probably be like, look, it's based off of industry specific best practices from DORA. That's how we built this. Is there any recommendations around there you would have for that?
I think you can definitely mention that. The challenge with the DORA metrics is DORA metrics are, unfortunately, they measure your maturity in a DevOps lifecycle. They don't necessarily measure the exact ROI you get, right? They say, what was your lead time before and today? And based on that, you sort of, you kind of come up with a situation where you say, okay, I'm getting better in my DevOps processes. But it doesn't say this is the ROI. So what we've done is we've kind of adopted that language, but the items underneath are more time savings and ROI oriented rather than just trying to measure yourself or benchmark yourself in terms of how far or how advanced your DevOps processes are they getting better over time. Most of the DORA metrics are really meant to capture that. If you look at the deployment frequency, they measure, is my deployment frequency getting better over time? But they are not suited for how much is the ROI based on that that I actually capture.
Good.
So what we've done is try to capture that part.
Perfect. And then a follow-up question: is there a recommended 2-3 slides template that we have for presenting this information? I don't think I'd really want to present the spreadsheet to the customer. Are we going there next or soon, or is there already something?
Yes, there is already one, and I need to link it and make some edits to it to make it suited with this particular taxonomy. So let me do that, and I'll publish that.
Perfect. Thank you.
4 slide. Yeah.
Awesome. Bodhi, you're next.
So for the smaller size businesses, I know that the TEI was based on like an average size business of 3,000. How do we best do that for, say, a 500 seat organization or a 300 seat organization? And also notice that the calculator or the estimator only goes down to 1,000 as an example.
I think Colin can answer that better. He is, is best suited to answer that.
Yeah, so the slider, so there is a disparity between the slider and the values that are in there. So yes, the TEI model in and of itself was based around that customer set that had a much bigger set of customers. So far, we have been just still having people enter in, starting at that, it should accept a 500 or lower value in that. It's just the visual representation of the slider goes in there. If it's not taking that, I'll go back and address that with Forrester. But it is a design for a lead generation effort around those elements. Now, what we have seen so far is down to those scalability limits, down to that 1,000 in the slider, that the results generally still make sense, like aren't crazy, but yeah, you're right that the TEI is not specifically there for, or the online calculator may not support the specific smaller opportunities that you're looking for. That's where I think there's some value in either using the simpler model that Mahesh has mentioned and walked through, and or using the study itself for the customer to define their value with the models that are described in the study.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So just looking at time, we are over time. There are a couple more questions. Should we wrap up, Mahesh and Colin? Are you okay to stay just a little bit longer for a couple questions?
I'm okay with staying a little longer.
Yeah, same.
Great. Totally understand if people need to drop. We'll keep going. The next question is from Ruben. In case Ruben, oh, there you go.
Sorry
Ruben.
about that. I was muted. Mahesh, thanks a lot. Good job on this. I'm not sure if we should be, or we can introduce this in a POC stage, but if a customer is doing a POC, how much of time does it typically take to build up enough GitLab data to be able to complete this form?
You know, that's a tough one for me to answer because I have not been involved in a situation where it's a POC, which is a very short time frame of analysis, right? Most of the situation that we've been involved with up until now is the customer has used our product for a certain length of time, like 3-4 months, so that they feel like, in many cases, longer than that. So they feel a level of comfort with the benefits that they've realized. Mm-hmm. So I'll have to take that input back and give some specific guidelines on, in a POC, like how to conduct this kind of an ROI study or a benchmarks in a POC. And I'm open to ideas. I really have not experienced that situation. I haven't been brought into that situation, so I'm not able to give you specifics on that.
Okay, thank you.
And Paul, got a question?
Yeah, thanks, David. Hey, Mahesh. In a previous company, we did something very similar where we leveraged this ROI, or what we call the business value assessment, where we had business value assessment essays work with our customers, and they had a set of questions that they'd pull out from the customers. And these folks, these business value assessment essays were skilled. They did this time and time again. And quite honestly, when we did this, I did not lose a deal. So this is very critical to winning large deals. I guess my question is, will there be additional education rollout in regards to this? And if so, will it kind of wrap in the essays as well and kind of work hand in hand to work with a customer to pull those questions out using their data?
Yeah, it's a very good point. There has been a request from the field to do just that, like an ROI service where you have people who are actually just, working with the customers or prospects to build the ROI case. We have to figure out the exact model on that, but in the interim, I think the essays are best suited because they are closest to the data. They're seeing this and they obviously have more touch points with the customer around these aspects, clearly, right? How long is a bill taking, things like that. So they're the best suited to do this. What I'm thinking about is maybe having some sort of office hours on a weekly basis where if people have questions and they're thinking of a customer scenario and they want some help in modeling that or thinking through it, we can be available to kind of help them through that process. So that's one option, and you all have to tell me whether that's a viable option or not, at least in the interim. The other thing is, obviously, we're going to do more training. We're going to have more detailed videos. I want to get 1 or 2 customer examples and put that as a video saying, customers, this is a scenario, this is what they told us, here is how we built the ROI model for them, so that you can quickly understand, because I feel like those nuggets are lost if they are not articulated. So certainly there is a lot more to be done, and I'll work with David Summers on the enablement. But let us know your feedback on the office hours concept, whether that is something that you would be, that you find attractive, and we can go ahead and execute on that.
Yeah, at the previous company, there was actually it was almost like command of the message training that we did on this. Mm-hmm. And we work with the champion, and what happened is their data. And when we went for the budget on these $500,000+ deals, we presented it to the economic buyer, and quite honestly, the ROI was fantastic, and it just made the decision so much easier to say yes, let's move forward with, in that case, the previous company. But I can see the exact same thing happening with GitLab. So it's powerful when you get it in the hands of the economic buyer.
That's our goal with this ROI analysis, is to kind of influence the economic buyer to make sure that they are totally bought into it, because without that, it's going to hard to make a sale in these economic times, right? So it's kind of hard.
Well, so we may be following up with you, Paul, to get more details as we look at ways that we can continue to iterate and roll this out to support the teams.
Yes, Simon had a good question. He's like, do you still have the materials? I'm gonna have to dig through some of my old stuff to see if I do. I'll let you know.
Thanks everyone for your participation. Special thanks to Mahesh and Colin for leading the session. Awesome work. Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody that contributed. We will talk to you again soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.